and you get to vote. I was invited to speak about the joys of beekeeping, and then we both looked before I got here and realized I did that last year. So we're changing on the fly. So this is a democracy tonight. It's a true democracy. Whichever group gets most of the hands up, that's the topic I'll do. The rest of you are just too bad so sad, all right? So I'm going to ignore the folder, but I'm just reminding myself. All right, so the three topics are, they're fairly recent revisions of talks I've given in a while. Perhaps the oldest of the three would be a talk on mating biology of honeybees. So how do honeybees mate? How do queens do their thing? How do you get genetic diversity in the colony, and what does it mean? That's number one. Number two, small hive beetles. That's pretty simple to say. I was in the Netherlands back in March, and they have small hive beetles in Europe, and everybody's freaking out over there. And so I heavily revised my small hive beetle talk, and that's that. The next talk is one I've only given twice, I think, in public, maybe 3 times, but I'm going to give it a couple times at the bee college coming up. And it's biogeography of the honeybees. That sounds scary and fancy, but bio simply means life. Biology, the study of life. Biogeography, life geography of honeybees. In other words, what are honeybees? Where do they come from? What types of honeybees exist? What types do we use? What are the characteristics of the bees that we use, etc. Scientifically, that's the more fascinating of the three. All right? So I'm not trying to persuade you. So just to remind you, I talk about the birds and the bees, I talk about small hive beetles, and I talk about honeybee biogeography. Birds and bees, reproduction. I'll do it that way. Reproduction, small hive beetles, and biogeography. Reproduction, small hive beetles, and biogeography. So who wants honeybee reproduction? So that you'll understand about queens mating, how your bees become your bees. I'm going to let someone else count because it's pretty late for me. Okay, I'll count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, I think it's 19, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm going to say 4. I don't know. This is the electoral college at work. I rounded everything up. All right, so it doesn't really matter what the vote is. I'm just going to pick one. All right, so who wants small hive beetles? All right, that one's definitely not in the right. Okay, that one I know is certain. Who wants biogeography? Okay, I'm afraid that one wins, right? Do I need to count, or do you, the first group, are you going to rule the news for the next 4 years if you don't?
Can I have a chance to sway the hive beetles?
Uh-oh, you see there? People want a redo. This is not Brexit. We are not giving you a redo. That's somebody else. That's another country's problem. That's not our problem. All right? See, I'm politically savvy. All right. They tell us when you get your PhD, you got to quit paying attention to just what you do. You're supposed to think about other things too. All right, I think biogeography won. I promise I will make it relevant. There'll be a few stories scattered throughout. Yeah, that's all I got to say. So en route to doing biogeography, I just want to say a few things. Probably you know, and I think I've seen some advertisements around, that not Monday, but a week from Monday, that's Bee College week for us. So we have Bee College on Monday and Tuesday. Then we take a deep breath on Wednesday. And then we have Bee College again on Thursday, Friday. So the Monday, Tuesday Bee College is nearly exactly the same as the Thursday, Friday Bee College. We're just repeating it because our lab, while it is nice and large, it's not large enough for the crowd that we had last year. So we're going to try very hard to split it up and make it where we can manage it. So the talks are nearly the same, and as you might imagine, it's difficult to get speakers to do both sets of days. So there may be a little bit of difference. Some people are signed up for both sets of days because they realize that every hour there's 4 to 6 things being offered. So even if you come to both sets of days, so all 4 days, you technically can still not hear everything we do because there's a lot of different things. All right, biogeography of honeybees. I'm going to try to skip the irrelevant slides. Yep, there we go. Okay, I will start with this slide here. Is it possible to dim some lights up here? Switches? I have control of that? Oh, something's happening. I'm feeling good about this. All right. Now, I apologize profusely that the first slide with which I am leading is a slide of words. They tell you not to put words in slides. We do a lot of online training, and anytime you do online training, you've got to have words because you're not there to teach people. So all that I want to tell you is this very first, I don't even know how to use the laser pointer because there's 52 screens in here. So I'm going to put this thing down, and I think my cursor shows up. Look at that. All right. So biogeography is simply the study of the distribution of species. That's all I want you to know from that slide. What's most important about that concept is if you're going to understand the distribution of species, you've got to know what a species is. So I am a biologist. Entomology is a subdiscipline of biology, just like microbiology and genetics, etc. So I am a biologist, and biologists disagree on what a species happens to be. I know that's hard to think about, but the reason they disagree is because every rule they come up with, there are plenty of exceptions to that rule. So I'm going to give you the best working definition that biologists tend to use. So species simply means two things can cross and produce viable offspring. Okay. That means a horse and horses are all one species. Donkeys are all one species. But when you cross a horse and a donkey, which is possible, they can have babies, which is possible, but their babies, mules, are sterile. So though they can produce offspring, their offspring are not viable. So horse plus donkey equals mule. So horses and donkeys are not the same species. Do you get that? Yes. The reason that is important is because you've got to understand what species happen to be. As an example, everybody likes to tell me about that other species of honeybee that we have in North America called the African honeybee. It is not a different species of honeybee. It's the same species of bee that you keep in your white boxes. And we'll tell you all more about that as we move on. Okie dokie? Okie dokie. We'll skip this map, we'll skip that map. I'm just trying to get you to the stuff you want to really care about. We'll stop. Here. All right, look at me. You are freaking out, I can tell. Look at me. It's a Thursday night for me as well. Right? So, you all remember from biology, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Right? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Because we're humans. We can't just, look at stuff. We're lumpers. So we get stuff that looks similar and then behave similar, maybe have physical characteristics that are similar, and we call them related. You probably hear that all the time. Something's related to something else. So kingdom is the largest group. Kingdom, phylum is the next largest group. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So class, insecta, is where all the insects hang out. Kingdom, phylum, class. So class, insecta. Kingdom, phylum, class, order. Within the insects, there are different orders of insects. Name for me some types of common insects. Wasps. I'll get to those in a minute. Roaches. Roaches have their own order within insects. All the roaches are related. They're in the order that roaches fall under. Who said flies? Flies have their own order. Ants. We'll hang on to that one. They are insects. Butterflies and moths are in the same order. Lepidoptera. Beetles are in the same order. Coleoptera, and so on. The reason we're hanging on to wasps and ants is because bees, wasps, and ants all belong to the same order. They all belong to the order Hymenoptera. Hymenoptera. So my kids are learning Latin. They can't stand my wife for it because we're homeschoolers. And so my wife's teaching Latin at home because frankly, you can speak Latin. Biology is going to be the easiest thing on the planet. So if you know Latin, you will know Hymenoptera means hymen is membrane, optera is wings. So membranous wings. So within this order, you have insects that have wings that are similar to membranes. Right? Bees, wasps, and ants. Another peculiarity about Hymenoptera that I plan to just punt to you and let you ruminate on when you leave this room is that all Hymenoptera reproduce using haplodiploid. So we know Don't worry, I'm going to explain that. It's my job to, your job to learn, my job to teach. All right, haplodiploidy is really simple. You know it as drones are haploid, they come from unfertilized eggs. Females are diploid, they come from fertilized eggs. So all bees, wasps, and ants do the same thing. All bee, wasp, and ant males are from unfertilized eggs. All bee, wasp, and ant females are from fertilized eggs. You got that? All right, so those are some interesting characteristics of Hymenoptera. Within kingdom, phylum, class, order, Hymenoptera, family, you've got lots of families of Hymenoptera. The ants all belong to a family called Formicidae. There are multiple families of wasps. There are multiple families of bees. And what happened is people did kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and then they went back and go, man, there's suborders. There's stuff we should put in between order and genus. Oh man, there's subgenera. And now we're going to invent a word and call it tribe, and we're going to stick tribe in there as well. So even though it's mainly kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, they're going to drop stuff like suborders and tribes and jibber jabber. The reason I'm saying this is because there is a family called Apidae. That is the family to which your honeybees belong. That family, Apidae, that family has 3 tribes that I will tell you about here. Tribe Apini, which is where the honeybees are. Melaponini, which is where the stingless bees are. I said 3, I'm going to tell you 4. Bombini, which is where the bumblebees are. And Euglossini, which is where the orchid bees are. So that means those 4 tribes all belong to the family Apidae, which means they have stuff that's similar in nature. Incidentally, those stingless bees are pretty fascinating. If you look at the image on the left, there are 2 big branches of stingless bees, Trigona and Melipona, and stingless bees are distributed everywhere else in the world except where we live. So if you really want to see some cool bees, you're going to go travel to the tropics, you can go to Africa, you can go to Australia, you can go to South America. There's bukus of species of stingless bees. They're a type of honeybee-esque thing. They make social colonies. They're real small. They store their honey in pots, and they're stingless. Shazam! Wouldn't you like that? Right? The beauty of stingless bees, though, is while they're stingless, they are not defenseless. I was in Brazil a number of years ago, and this particular university in Brazil, the University of Sao Paulo, and the campus of Ribeirão Preto. You can tell I can't see it, right? I'm from Georgia, so those words do not roll off the tongue. All right. So I was there, and they had like 40-something species of stingless bees represented. And the cool thing about stingless bees is they all attack you a different way. But it's not like super painful. You'll survive. So I would hunker down at the entrance of the nest and just knock on it to see what they would do to me. Some like to pull your nose hairs. Some like to go in your ears. Some are specialist eyebrow and eyelash pullers. Some bother your hair. Some spit acid. Those are my favorite. You're like, whoa, this is probably not normal. I should stop this. But they all do different things. But that's not tonight's talk. Sorry, that's stingless bees. We'll have to get someone else talking. You guys all know bumblebees. The orchid bees, they're super cool. We've got some in South Florida. They've been introduced. And now move on from there. So within the tribe Apini, which is where your honeybees are found, these bees, everybody who belongs to this tribe, has these things in common. Number 1, they carry their pollen on their hind legs. Number 2, they're eusocial. EU in this sense means truly. They are truly social. They're like the social of the social. As an example, bumblebees are primitively eusocial. And one of the key differences is that bumblebee queens overwinter, and they come out in spring and start their own nests. So bumblebee queens are capable of producing wax, they're capable of foraging, they're capable of constructing stuff, they're capable of defense, and when they start having babies, the babies take over those jobs from her. Whereas in truly social bees, there is a division between the reproductives and the workers. Queen honeybees are otherwise useless. They can only lay eggs. They can't found the nest. They can't overwinter in the colony. They can't overwinter themselves alone and away from the colony. They cannot forage. They cannot construct wax. They cannot process honey. They can only lay eggs. So that's one of the difference between a primitively eusocial colony and a eusocial, a truly social colony. Other characteristics of the tribe Apini, they produce honey, which is is why we call them honeybees. They're native to Eurasia and Africa. You'll hear this a lot, so don't panic. And there's a debate on how many species of honeybees there happens to be. So I'm your speaker tonight, which makes me right. If you bring another speaker, they are free to tell you something different. They usually will say there's somewhere between 7 and 11 species. I recognize 9. Okie dokie? 8 of those occur exclusively in Asia, which means unless you go to Asia, you will only ever see one honeybee. So 8 species are native to Asia. That means 1 species is native to not Asia, and that species is the one we keep, and that one is native to Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. So the 9 species of Apini are native to Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. That's where honeybees are naturally distributed. Where are they not naturally distributed? You guessed it, North America, South America, Australia, and many of the islands scattered around the world. They're also not native to Antarctica, but there are no bees there at the moment, so because it's kind of cold. All right, so let me tell you about these 9 species. Unfortunately, the best picture that's in a magazine article about some of these species is from an author who believes there's only 7 species. So the reason I say that is these are the 7 species. Per that author, it's 2009. We have more up-to-date DNA evidence that there are, in fact, at least 9 species. And those honeybee species are split into 3 groups because it's not enough to just have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and tribe somewhere in there. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus. There are 3 subgenera. So if the genus, I'm not losing you. Just tell yourself, I will not be lost. Let me tell you, my undergrad's in pre-med biology, so I took 152 million chemistries. And I told myself as an undergraduate, I can't understand chemistry, so I quit trying. And then when I was a grad student, I was like, well, you probably need to know this stuff, so you probably better flip that switch in your head and start saying you can understand it. And when I did that, life changed. And then I discovered that for most of us, it's just whether we want to or not. So you can understand this, I promise you. For heaven's sakes, I'm from Georgia. We know that if a Georgian can do it, you can do it. All right? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus. The genus of honeybees is Apis, A-P-I-S. There's 3 subgenera. If you look at me, I'll walk you through it, then you can look back at the picture and it'll make sense. If there are 3 subgenera and the genus is Apis, then the subgenera names are all going to be a play on the word Apis. So one subgenus is Microapis, the small Apis. One subgenus is Megapis, the big Apis. The other subgenus is simply Apis, the Apis. All right? So that means there's big honeybees, small honeybees, and in between honeybees. There happens to be 2 species of big, 2 species of small, and 5 species of in between. When you hear scientists like myself talking about it, you will often hear the Megapis called the giant honeybees, the Microapis called the dwarf honeybees, and the Apis called the cavity nesters. The fact that we call the 5 species that are Apis cavity nesters implies that the other 4 species don't what? Nest in cavities. See? You can do it! That means the big Apis and the small Apis are open nesters. You can see one of the big Apis. It's the big daddy right in the middle of the screen. That is Apis dorsata. You can see to the bottom left the 2 small Apis species, Apis andreniformis and Apis florea. You can see A, B, C, and D, 4 of the 5 cavity nesters, Apis mellifera, Apis cerana, Apis nuluensis, Apis gashevnikovi, and Apis nigricincta. I think nuluensis is the one not on the list, because back in the day they believed that nuluensis was a subspecies of Apis cerana. But our DNA work has shown that that is not the case. It is in fact a species, which they didn't know. All right? So I'm going to introduce you to all 9 of these species. The reason I like this picture, though, is it's actually to scale. So the apis bees, the ones that you know, the one that you know, is similar in size to the other cavity nesters. The giant honeybees, Dorsata and Laboriosa, that's Dorsata there, they are about twice as big as Mellifera, the bee that you keep. Florea and Adreniformis are about half the size of the bee that you keep. I think those 4 species are fantastic. So there are 2 microapis, Adreniformis and Florea. There's 2 large apis, Dorsata and Laboriosa. I shall introduce you to them all. You need not panic. And there are 5 cavity nesters, Serrana, Nuluensis, Nigroscincta, Kashevnikovi, and Mellifera. All right. Wikipedia is occasionally useful. Wikipedia, though, recognizes only 7 species of honeybees. But the reason it's useful is because someone took the time to do a distribution map of those 7 species. Where is the diversity of apis greatest? Southeast Asia. That's where honeybees are believed to have originated. That's where you're going to find 8 of the 9 species. You will actually find the 9th species because Mellifera has been taken there. If you'll look, there's a lot of bees, for example, here, that are distributed on just island chains, or in the very, very southeast part of Asia. It's fascinating to think about, and I want to introduce you to these bees. And incidentally, if you want to put honeybees in a greater context, there are 20,000 species of bees on the planet. There are 4,500 species of bees in North America. There are about 320 species of bees in Florida. And of the 20,000 species of bees on the planet that exist, 9 of those are honeybees. That means there's, 19,991 species of bees that aren't honeybees. That's pretty fantastic if you think about it. It's a very diverse group. All right, let me introduce you to these bees. The microapis. These are the dwarf honeybees, Florea and Adreniformis. And my oldest child and I were in Thailand back in February. I travel a lot, so I never remember exactly where I'm supposed to be places. And when we were there, our host at the University of Burapha there in Thailand, Chonburi, Thailand, they have Apis florea, and she told me it hurts the most. It's a little bitty tiny honeybee, so I tried to get that thing to sting me. They are the cutest little honeybees. I grabbed them, I pet them, and then I finally got one to sting me, but it was such a weak sting on the tip of my finger that I didn't even feel it. And when that thing flew away, it was like a little baby sting. It was so cute. And I couldn't feel it. But I am told that these things do not feel good. So Apis florea and Adreniformis are interesting, and I'll tell you why. That's my oldest son, right there, holding the florea colony somewhere in the bush in Thailand. I have no idea where we were that way. But florea is interesting because, like my oldest son, Matthias, is showing you, they make single combs. They do not stack their combs. They make single combs hanging on tree branches usually. These and Adreniformis are considered the most primitive of the 9 species of honeybees. They believe that these things still possess some of those, archetype old traits. For example, these bees do not do their dances on the face of the combs. These bees go to the top and do their dances on top. So whereas our bees, when they do their figure-8 dance and they are dancing, the pattern that they're dancing on the face of the comb is in relation to the sun. You know that. Florea and Adreniformis, on the other hand, dance on top of the comb and literally dance towards the food source. So their dance is pointing the direction of the food. The cavity nesters moved that dance to the face of the comb and added the sun component. That's where they left Florea and Adreniformis in the dust. So Florea is pretty fascinating. If you go to Asia, especially their open-air markets, there will be baskets full of Florea combs. They are heavily hunted. They are sold in the market, not for honey, but for the consumption of brood. So there'll be these little combs that are about that big, that are about that thick, basket full of 200 of them, and people will buy them so that they can eat the brood. Pretty crazy, huh? These things were absolutely everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Andreniformis is similar in nature. It's slightly smaller of the two bees, but it also makes a single comb. It's also hunted for purposes of consuming the brood, etc., and its behavior, life history are otherwise similar to Florea. But what's interesting is, given that these bees are in the tropic, when it rains, they get wet. These are not cavity nesters. They are hanging exposed to the elements. Now, to me, the more interesting of the three branches of honeybees is the Megapus branch. How many of you watched the Disney live person Jungle Book from about 3 or 4 years ago? Not the Netflix version. Netflix also did a live person. But the Disney version, Mowgli, can't even say his name, hunts honeybees. He is hunting one of the two giant species of honeybees. If you look at your pinky, these bees are about from your middle knuckle to the tip of your pinky. They are massive honeybees. They are also the world's most defensive honeybees. They too make single combs. They do not stack their combs. They too nest exposed, but their combs are wider than I can reach and taller than I am. Dorsata tends to nest on trees and man-made structures. Apis laboriosa tends to nest on cliff faces. So they're the bees of the Himalayas. So if you've ever watched those old National Geographic specials with the dudes climbing up those super dangerous ropes to go cut out some honey, they are hunting laboriosa. Do you know what the #1 killer of honey hunters is? For the dorsata, people think it's the fog. It's actually tigers, because they do the honey hunting in tiger regions. It's some crazy stuff, man. I don't want to ever hear you complain about you beekeeping endeavors anymore. You ain't climbing no ladders 2,000 feet and there ain't tigers waiting for you at the bottom. All right, the reason there's a debate over the number of species, and I'm just going to say this just because I've thrown a lot of scientific things at you. I know you're like me, you like to be confused. I told you Apis dorsata is one of those species. It has 3 subspecies: Apis dorsata dorsata, Apis dorsata binghami, and Apis dorsata pregfulia. And the reason people think there are multiple species is some people think this one and this one are not dorsata variants, but are themselves their own species. So the jury's still out a little bit on those two. If they end up being species, then they'll go to 11. But until then, I think they're just subspecies of dorsata, so I think that there are, in fact, none. These bees are amazing. So when we were in Thailand, we took this picture. There's a big old comb hanging right there from that tree. Why was I in Thailand? Well, that individual holding a bag of bees, I'm on his committee. He's doing research in my lab right now for a year. He and both his professor are over in my lab. We'll get to meet him if he comes to the college. I don't know if you know this, but you have things that live in your belly that make it possible for you to be alive. You know that, right? There's bacteria that live in your belly that's necessary for your survival. You do know that, right? Right. We call them microsymbionts. Honeybees also have bacteria that should live in their belly that help them survive. And you all know as beekeepers that honeybees can get a disease called nosema. That nosema disrupts the bacteria that our honeybees need to survive. So he is spending a year in my lab looking at how nosema impacts the gut microbiota in our bees, and if it's responsible for causing nutritional deficiencies because it's out-competing what bees actually need to grow in their gut. Does that make sense? So I went to his student defense in Thailand back in February, and while I was there, I needed samples of bees because my lab is trying to develop diagnostic markers for these species. Because when people bring bees into ports, the government wants to know what bee they are. And we're trying to develop the tool, the genetic tool that they can use to determine what species they have. So in order to do that, we need fresh bees. So while I was there, we collected dorsata, florea, and serrana. You'll meet serrana in a moment. But what's funny is I remember going to my colleague and saying, how are we going to get these bees? She's like, don't worry, I got a beekeeper. So that beekeeper, if we went and saw a colony of bees, we're like, point at it, and he just goes and gets it. So he got to be so amazing that I was picking the hard to get colonies. There'd be like 3 up there, and they'd be like, that one. And he like, they'd come down with a bag of bees. This is him. I love this picture that I took. You see him there? He's going after that dorsata colony. And what he does, remember, dorsata's mean. This guy's climbing up that tree barefooted. And when he gets to the top, he pulls a little veil over his head. And he has this big, you know those old straw brooms? He's got something that looks like that without a handle. And he lights it on fire and stuffs grass, fresh grass in the tip, which makes a smoke. And then he just waves it at the bees. And that's what he's doing in that picture. You can see him, he's nearly completing a wave. You can see the straw in his hand right here that's releasing the smoke that is getting these dorsata bees to leave the comb. Now that's not him, but that's someone up a cliff hunting laboriosa. So he would get these bee samples and bring them to us, and we have them back in the lab. They are dead, so you need not worry. We brought them over on ethanol, and we had permits to do it. So don't blame me if there's some weird disease that comes into the country. All right, there's one thing I need to tell you about dorsata, and it's always dangerous to YouTube stuff in public. So I need you all to, I'm going to YouTube search something because it's worth seeing. Yeah. Please, don't be scared. Okay, here we go. Look at me. All right. There's nothing too dangerous looking. Oh. All right. Apis dorsata has a fantastic defense mechanism. When you approach the nest, the bees in the middle will wave their abdomen, which causes their neighbors to wave their abdomen, which causes their neighbors to wave their abdomen. And what you'll get is you'll get a wave of these concentric circles exploding all over the comb. So what dorsata is doing is it's getting the thing that's going to the nest to stop and go, wow, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Wow, they're launching an attack off the bottom of the comb. So these videos are all over the internet, and I hate to click on one in public because you never know what's going to come up on YouTube. Like this advertisement, but it's a green advertisement, so you won't be so mad. Look at that. Boom! 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 It is fantastic how amazing honeybees are. Boom! All right, I'm going to click on that before something dangerous happens. But what's interesting is that was the thing I most wanted to see. So I remember we sent the guy up a tree. The first time he went up a tree that was hanging over a river that was kind of dodgy looking. And I remember going, don't smoke the bees yet. Because I wanted him to get close and initiate that behavior in the bees. And I remember my son and I was going, that is the coolest thing we've ever seen. They were sitting there doing these waves. That guy was getting attacked, so we had to start smoking the bees. But it's a fantastic moment for science. It was almost as good as what Neil Armstrong did 50 years ago. All right, so I've got to leave these really cool. I want to tell you one more dorsata story. Oh, these things are so crazy cool. So there's a hog that will go use its talons and grab sections of comb and consume it. So this is a problem. They always attack it from the bottom of the nest, where dorsata has developed this behavior that when this hawk comes, these sheets of bees will go to the bottom of the comb and start festooning, making these big balls of bees at the bottom. So it looks like it's comb, because the bees are on the comb. So this hawk goes and grabs it and just gets talonfuls of bees. That's all they get. Isn't that cool? I've only told you about 4 of the species, and I haven't even told you all what they're capable of doing, because I've got to be done at 8:45. Now, there's 5 cavity nesters. They are Kashevnikovi, Serrana, Nuluensis, Nigrosyncta, and Mellifera. I'm not going to talk much about 4 of those cavity nesters, Kashevnikovi, Serrana, Nigrosyncta, and Nuluensis. But you can see here that Kashevnikov bees are the red bees. They typically are found or exclusively found in Borneo. Serrana is the most important of the 4 other cavity nesters to you, because that bee is the bee that is the natural host of a little mite you might have heard of called Varroa. The reason Varroa is so bad on our bees is because they left their natural host, Serrana, which has plenty of defenses to fight against Varroa, and they moved from Serrana to mellifera, the bees we keep. And our bees have never seen this mite before, and that's why they died. So Serrana is the bee that gave us varroa. Thank you, Serrana. It's not Serrana's fault. We took mellifera, we people. I'm taking part in being a person. People took mellifera over there, they jumped ship, and that's how it worked. So Nigricincta is an island species of honeybee, and JulyMtg, I love this bee. It is only found in Borneo, on mountains above 1,700 meters. Once you come down off of 1,700 meters, you either find Serrana or JamieEllis. But above 1,700 meters, it's a completely different species of apis. So I'm going to just show you those. Apis Serrana, when we were in Thailand, they had Apis Serrana. That was actually the bee I got stung by the most. I couldn't get dorsata to sting me. I couldn't get Florea to sting me. I couldn't stop Serrana from stinging me. We had to collect samples. We would go into those cracks, like in that coconut palm there, and those things were lighting me up. But they didn't hurt so bad. JamieEllis, there's lots of different color variations. You see it. I love the fact that there's this little remote island honeybee. Nigricincta, also in some Indonesian islands in the Philippines. And JulyMtg, this is the one that has most recently been described. These are all cavity nesters. They make smaller colonies than the bee that we keep, but they're interesting and used by a lot of Asians in their beekeeping in Asia. So now mellifera. This is the bee that you know and actually keep. Remember, this is only one of 9 species. I could spend the rest of tonight's talk and probably tomorrow night's talk on this slide. Not because there's interesting words on it, but I want you to think about it. I've shown you 8 species of honeybees and their distribution so far. Serrana has the largest of the distributions of the other bees. You see it there? But I want you to think about this. They're in the tropics in Southeast Asia. Mellifera, the bee you keep, is native from Northern Europe all the way down to Cape Town. That's its natural distribution. A single insect species lives in the tropics, the temperate regions, the deserts, arid, semi-arid, tropical, subtropical. That one species, Apis mellifera, has developed characteristics that allows it to survive heat, cold, dry, wet, lush vegetation, poor vegetation, and so on. This is one of the most remarkable species of critters on planet Earth, given what it is capable of doing and where it is. So if you think about it, mellifera, the bee that you keep, is naturally distributed in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Given the climatic variations, the topographical variations, the geographical variations, the environmental variations, the pest pressures, the people pressures, the flora and fauna, of course, this bee is going to diversify into a mess load of subspecies that are each good at living where they live. Right? So you get temperate, so remember, genus, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Below the species level of organization is something we call subspecies. You would use the word race. Just like there are different races of Homo sapien, there are different races of Apis mellifera. And all of those races have unique behavioral, some of them physical characteristics that just make them worth studying. So, depending on what scientist you ask, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 different subspecies of Apis mellifera. One of the most recent impactful papers, back in 2006, I'll slow down and start over. Within this cluster of about 30-ish subspecies of Apis mellifera, there are 6 main branches. I know you don't care about this, but they're the M, C, O, A, Y, and Z lineages. That means the bees from Apis mellifera that are in these various lineages are related. As an example, the A lineage is called the A lineage because they're all African honeybees. So all the African honeybees are kind of this pink color. They're all related. And then you kind of get the Middle Eastern honeybees that are this bluish color. Then the Eastern European honeybees that are this yellow color. The Northern honeybees in Europe that are this black color. And my absolute favorite, and the Iberian Peninsula, and right here at the top there are these pink black bees. Why? Because the African bees and the European bees have been naturally mixing here forever. So you get this kind of group of bees that's just got characteristics of being in Africa and being in Europe. That's just some crazy stuff to me. I love it. The diversity of these bees is fantastic, and I've just put the ones on here that some colleagues and I recognize. So remember, we keep Apis, the genus, Mellifera, the species, so the subspecies name is going to follow Mellifera. So on this slide, you'll see AM, which stands for Apis mellifera, and we usually refer to the subspecies by their subspecific name. So Anatoliaca. Where do you think Apis mellifera anatoliaca is? Anatolia, what's that? Turkey. You said Turkey. This is the Turkish honeybee. Armeniaca. Armenia. Mida. Let's see if you get this one. This is Iraq and Iran. Syriaca. Syrian honeybee. This is the honeybee of the Bible. Adansona, the West African bee. Capensis. That's just for you. The world's most interesting subspecies of honeybee, the Cape honeybee. Intermissa, somewhere in Middle Africa. Lamarckii, the Egyptian honeybee. I love, when I'm in the UK, when I'm in London, I love to go to the British National Museum because they've got a lot of ancient Egyptian artifacts in there, and those daggum Egyptians sure like to chisel themselves some honeybees in their hieroglyphics. There's honeybees everywhere on their hieroglyphics. They were chiseling pictures of Lamarckii. You know what's sad to me is that Egypt is at the crossroads between the Middle East, Europe, and Africa. So bees come and go, and of course we all move stuff all the time. That Egypt mainly has European subspecies of honeybees there now. Some people believe Lamarckii is extinct. Wouldn't it be a travesty if the Egyptian honeybee were lost? Some people think there might be isolated populations around some oases scattered around Egypt. Why is this important? Why do we care? This doesn't have anything to do with me. Well, it does. Did you know there's 2.7 million honeybee colonies in the United States? Did you know that there's about 1,100 breeder queens in the United States that produce that 2.7 million honeybee colonies? That means we've got this many bees producing this many bees. Part of our problems is our just a genetic diversity is rotten. The genetic diversity of Apis mellifera is greatest in Africa. You pick two colonies that are side by side and the chances of them being related are pretty small. It is incredible, the genetic diversity of honeybees in Africa and the Middle East. Why am I telling you this? Because my guess is that the genes that we need to keep our bees alive are probably buried in those populations. So is it important that we lose the Egyptian honeybee? You bet it is. Because there's no telling what resources are available in those populations that are going to save our industry 100 or 200 or 300 years from now. All right, we'll get off the soapbox. Literia, which is a South African bee, which is kind of from the eastern part of South Africa and up. Major, Monticola, Sahariax, Scutellata. Scutellata is that bee that you know of as the African bee that the press likes to call the killer bee. The way that you remember this subspecies is quite simple. When you meet the bee, you want to Scutellata tail pretty fast. Samensis. Unicolor. Unicolor is a fantastic bee because it's the Madagascar honeybee. Madagascar has its own honeybee. It's its own island. Out there off of the east coast of South Africa, in Zimbabwe, it's got its own honeybee, unicolor. But guess what? The Europeans have been taking honeybees there forever. The unicolor is starting to get watered down. Wouldn't that be a travesty? We just published, we're about to publish the mitogenome sequence of unicolor. Yemenitica, the Ethiopian honeybee. Atabai, carnica. If you read the literature and you keep carniolan honeybees, you have Apis mellifera carnica. Caucasica, the Caucasian honeybee. Cecropia, Cypria, Iberiensis, Ligustica. Ligustica is the bee that you know of as the Italian honeybee. Probably Ligustica is the one that you have most of the DNA of pulsing through the veins of your little bees. Bees don't have veins. Scratch that from the record. Macedonica, Mellifera mellifera. This is another fantastic bee. I'm from the middle of Nowhereville, Georgia. And all the old people, when I started keeping bees when I was 12, used to tell me, well, my grandfather used to keep these little black bees, or little German bees is what they would call them. That is Apis mellifera mellifera. Apis mellifera mellifera is the northern European honeybee. It is the bee that came over probably in 1620, 1621, landed in Jamestown with the people who were boating their ways there. And that bee is the bee that our forefathers kept. So if you look at the old literature, they refer to the black bee or the German bee. That's the bee that it is. Apis mellifera rutneri, Siciliana, etc. These are the subspecies we believe exist. Now, of course, depending on where you live in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, these are the ones that you'd be using, but we don't live there. We tend to live in the United States, and what we have is Ligustica is the dominant represented bee that we have in North America. The reason it's so dominant is not because it's a pretty golden color, but it's because it makes big colonies, and it's a pansy. Of all the honeybee subspecies with which I've interacted, I get stung by this one less. Its temperament, its large colonies, and desire to hoard lots of honey make it the thing that beekeepers like. Its main drawback is it tends to overdo it sometimes. It feeds too much in winter. Caucasica is a fairly popular subspecies in North America. It's a darker bee. We don't use it as much in Florida. There's cardiolans and other variations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on this slide and make a few concluding statements, and we'll do some Q&A because I believe I have exactly 12 more minutes. And I want to make sure that we all get done on time. So I want to say a couple things. Number one, I promise I'm going to round out my talk. So I'm just putting this up here to say, you can take a picture of this. This is how to reach me. This is my lab's website, ufhoneybee.com. This is our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook feed at ufhoneybee lab. I always tell people I don't do social media. I like to live in the world. But the people who work for me, who are a whole lot younger than me, do social media. And so I will look at Instagram before I go to a meeting, and I may have told you this last year. If we don't, and I always look at Instagram after I leave a meeting, right before I fall asleep at nighttime. And if we don't have more followers, I'm never coming back here again. So you better get following. And there's my email address, JamieEllis@ufl.edu. So why did I give you a talk with the biogeography of honeybees? Because we tend to think only about ourselves. There's this really great slide that I show to college students at UF. And maybe some of you have seen it and heard me give this spiel. But it shows a picture of the United States and all the migration routes of pollen of beekeepers who move their bees around the U.S. for pollination purpose. And I always pause and say, hey, what do you guys notice about these slides? And one of the things, and it also shows all the different plants that honeybees are used to pollinate in the United States. And believe it or not, most of those plants are grown on the perimeter of the country. And inevitably, when I show that slide, some of my college students will go, I say, what is it that you notice here? They're like, oh, all the crops that honeybees are used to pollinate are grown close to the ocean. You have to see the slide to appreciate it. But remember that there's stuff all across the top of the country, all across the bottom of the country. And I say, well, that's a very interesting observation, but you've got to remember that there's this country called Canada north of us, and that there's this country called Mexico south of us. And what you really meant to say is that we grow the crops on the perimeter of our country because there's not an ocean up there and an ocean down there, despite what you think. Right? So one of the reasons I like to talk about biogeography is there's a lot of bees on this planet. And certainly, within Apis mellifera, we have a gene pool that no doubt could solve all of our problems. I have no doubt in my mind the answer to every bee problem we have resides in the gene pool where honeybees are native. Their assortment of behaviors, just simple things. How much propolis they use, where they like to nest, how much some groom and some don't, how much some abscond, how much some swarm. I am utterly convinced that the answer is in those bees. For example, a lot of the African population, subspecies of honeybees, as you know, are tolerant of varroa. But one of the problems about African bees is they tend to be more defensive. Right? So there's soon to be genetic technologies that will allow us to address that. But people freak out when you use the words genetic and technologies in the same sentence. You often know this as like genetically modified organism. However, I shall not be any more political than that. What I will say is that we have a population of bees that can save us. However, the population that we keep, the managed bees, suffers. We have lots of issues, right? So I think it's really cool to know that there are other things out there and that someday we might have the ability to fix our own problems using some of the bees that nature gave us. Also, I also think as a beekeeper, it's just a good idea to know more than just about our craft. So that's why I like to give that talk. It's fascinating to me. My lab does some dabbling in the research in this category, and it's interesting, at least to me. All right, I shall stop because I want to give you at least 8 minutes to ask me questions, and that's what I need to do if I'm going to get 8 minutes. So who asks questions? Don't have to be related to the talk. It can be related about other things. Yes, sir?
So I'm a relatively new beekeeper, and one of the things that I noticed was the policy for best practices is even if you catch swarms, one is to requeen them. And I believe that is driven by impact organization.
Okay, so is that a question or just a statement that you want me to make? Okay.
So is there a thought about the policy changing because in the name of genetic diversity?
Okay, so his comment is that, you know, they're under the best management, Brandy help me, what's the official term? Best management? Requirements. Yes, there you go. Yes, there's the statement about requeening colonies of bees that have been captured from the wild. And is that in the best interest of me, the beekeeper, or the bees? And I would answer, yes, it still is. And I would say it's especially true for new beekeepers. In theory, if you bring a bee colony in from the wild and it's not showing heightened defensiveness, then it's of no risk, at least that first generation, right? However, most people, or a lot of new beekeepers, don't know what they're judging and can't make that call. It is always the safest and best recommendation to requeen a colony in southern Florida, and we could all just agree to disagree with this, but it's just the safest thing. At the end of the day, plenty of analyses, or at least some of the major analyses that conducted at FDEX prior to about 5 years ago, were showing the vast majority of bees that are captured from feral populations here have African traits in them. So it's the safest and best to requeen them. Does that mean you cannot bring them in and allow them to do their thing and see if they need to be requeened? Sure, you might have a generation that's gentle, but the moment they requeen themselves, you might lose that trait very quickly. You might, tend toward defensiveness. So I have no problem at all with the recommendation to requeen colonies that come in from feral populations. I think it's the safest and best thing to do, especially when you live in populated areas and you want to keep your neighbors happy. Yes, sir?
You had a slide that went up really fast. Seeing the origin of bees.
Sure.
And you said quickly it's disputed, or maybe new information, the origin was not in part of Asia. There was a new dispute here where they made
science. So the comment is that I skipped a couple of slides for the sake of time. But honeybees and bees in general are thought to have split from the specid wasp. Those are the dirt daubers. That's what we call them. I don't know what you might call them. But they're the things that make clay nests, and they sting spiders and stuff those spiders into those cells, and they lay their eggs on the spiders, and their babies eat the spiders alive. That's cool. So honeybees are believed to have descended from them, or bees in general. So we believe the diversity, since the diversity of honeybees is in Southeast Asia, that's where people believe that honeybees are from. However, there has been a species, an extinct species of Apis nearctica, that was discovered in the fossil record in the United States. And it's believed to be some eons old. I forget exactly how old. So we know that we had a species of honeybee before man was here. We have no idea what that does to the origin question. It's still probably safest to assume that where there is the greatest diversity is where they started, Southeast Asia. And we know there were land bridges through Alaska, so it's very conceivable that they could have not just diversified west, but could have diversified northeast. It's just, we don't know for sure. One of the biggest debates that we're having in my lab at the moment is actually, to me, more fascinating to me than that, which is, where did Apis mellifera originate? Because at the moment, people are making the claim that it came out of Africa 3 times, actually from the Ethiopia region. That one branch went down into southern Africa and created the African branch, and that 2 branches, separated in space and time, went into Europe, which made the M and the C branch. The reason that's fascinating to me is, why would Apis mellifera be native to Ethiopia if there are no other Apis species close to Ethiopia? So then we're having a biogeography discussion, because you all know India used to be on Africa, and it's pushing up into Asia now. So is that how bees got? We just don't know. We just don't know. And that's the beauty of science, is it's a living organism and we're always trying to correct ourselves. What also the beauty of science is that we don't stay ignorant forever. I like that. We eventually solve a problem, even if it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Another question. I think I've got time for maybe 1.5 questions.
You might tell them about why consensus is.
Why is consensus so cool? All right, actually, I'll be quick with this statement. Remember, there's about 30-ish subspecies of Apis mellifera. Capensis is in the Cape Town region of South Africa. It is so cool because though you know that our honeybees, bees we keep, when they go queenless and they fail to requeen themselves, the workers, who are also females, their ovaries can develop and they can lay eggs. But workers cannot mate, and since you know that honeybees are hymenoptera, they all have an option to subscribe to haplodiploidy, if a honeybee worker cannot mate, she can only lay unfertilized eggs, which means she can only produce drones. Cape workers, on the other hand, can also lay eggs, just like our workers. They also cannot mate, just like our workers, but Cape workers can lay diploid eggs without mating. So it is a female population that simply does not need men. It sounds like Hades to me. But I'm sure that the ladies were like, man, you know, we could just pull this off. But Capensis is capable of laying diploid eggs without mating. Fertilized, they're not technically fertilized, they're diploid eggs without mating. If I had to explain the process, it would take longer than the 32 seconds I have left. So, who's got one last question to send me and Annalie back up to Gainesville? Oh gosh, 3 hands came up. I'm going to do rapid fire. Short answers. Boom, go.
Quick question. Did you try some of the fruit?
Did I try some of the brood? Yes, I've eaten beef brood. And it's weird. And it pops in your mouth. There's another. Yes, sir.
If somebody wanted to increase the genetics, improve it within their own apiary, of course you've got the queen genetics plus the
Drones, yep.
drones, what would be the best thing that you could do?
If someone wanted to improve the genetics in their own apiary, what's the best thing they can do? I always tell people is purchase queens. Because queen breeders are supposed to be in the business about ensuring high genetics. Another option for you is if you allow, like if you split colonies and allow the nukes to requeen themselves, you can take your nukes to a beekeeper colleague's yard and allow them to mate there, and then bring them back as mated queens. I think a couple more speed rounds. We'll do these 2 speed. We'll go. Sure.
I was introduced to in Vietnam.
Sure.
Bees.
Sure.
And what is the species there?
What is the species of honeybee in Vietnam? There's at least 4 or 5. Serrata's there, dorsata's there, I believe, and then Dreniformis ciforia. So there's a handful of species. It's a good question. Last question, rapid fire, and I got to quit because y'all are getting antsy.
Beekeepers in the U.S. bringing species from Africa?
Okay, our beekeepers in the U.S. bringing honeybees from Africa and other places. You use the word species, but subspecies from Africa. Okay. Yes, they are. Illegally. And it's real simple. You go to a different country, you take a queen and put it in a cage, and you stick it in your pocket, and you're walking into an airplane. So as much as I would love to say that stuff never happens, there's millions upon millions of people who travel from our country to other country. Some of them are beekeepers. Some of them like what they see when they're in Italy or Greece or wherever, and they no doubt bring queens in. The reason I believe this to be the case is because a lot of people come over to my lab from overseas to visit me, and they buy queens and take them back home, which is no way.
Legally for diversity?
Is there a way to do it legally for diversity? It's rarely done by bringing in bees. It's mostly done by bringing in semen from drones. You guys have been a fantastic audience. I hope you guys have a good rest of the evening. You have my email address, so I'd love to hang around and chat. My daughter and I have a Dairy Queen date. We're going to go back up to Gainesville. So if you have my email address, you are more than welcome to email me as many times as you want to. Thank you.
But if you have raffle tickets, you can hang on. Well, while Jamie's here, I'm going to pull the raffle ticket for the Bee College. What do you want? Just one. The number is